Welcome to this episode of the 14 podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Trey Wallace, a good buddy of mine from the media industry for years, is with me. You and I have worked together on radio. Trey, you are now with Outkick, doing well for yourself there at a busy time of the year. Thanks for joining us today.
It's good to be on with you, Chris. Live here from Google headquarters. Hope everything is going well with you.
Is that where you are? Because I've been trying to figure this out.
Yes, I'm now at Google headquarters for the day, if you can't tell. So I'm enjoying life, Chris.
Gotcha. Well, let's walk outside San Francisco and get into the SEC. Let's start in Baton Rouge. What do you suspect is going to happen in the coaching search there at LSU?
I expect you're going to see a lot of names that are going to be thrown out over the next 3 to 4 weeks as we get close to the end of the season. Don't forget, we've got this early signing period, that's in here that's going to make things interesting when it comes to how they're going to go about finding their new head coach, but also getting that person in place in time, but maybe before that starts. So, I think you're going to see the usual names, but I think you're going to see James Franklin thrown in there. Billy Napier's kind of a step below, and that makes logical sense. As Mario Cristobal's name, come up again when it comes to Baton Rouge. Not saying in the past, but I'm saying in the college football world, I think he has a better opportunity to win that championship at Oregon, just because of the Pac-12 right now and how competitive this league is. But I think Jimmy Sexton's going to start throwing clients out there, and you're going to start seeing games just like you saw with the USC stuff yesterday, where Mike Tomlin just went off on the media for his name being put into the same landscape as the USC job. So you're going to see that, and I think just have to be prepared for that.
Did you see James Franklin's press conference this week?
Yeah, where he talked about going to the big house.
Yeah, and playing Illinois.
Yeah. Oh, I know. He was completely I don't know.
Wow.
This week, but he wasn't all there. Whatever. That was
weird. I'm like, what made him so off script? I mean, is he thinking about LA? Is he thinking about Baton Rouge? I mean, it was look, you and I know that guy, and that was off the charts atypical for James Franklin.
Well, it started with that tweet the other night where he put 1-0, 1-0, 1-0, 1-0, and then, it leads into the next day's press conference where he's talking about a different school he's going to be playing and then also a different venue. Like, come on, man. Like, life can't be that complicated for you right now. So who knows what Franklin's going to do.
Yeah, well, what I want to know is, do we see something at Florida by season's end? Because let's be honest, Florida is going to be 4-4, barring a miracle after this weekend. Now, look, I think the remaining 4 games, and let me check this, it's South Carolina, Samford, Missouri, Florida State. I think probably Florida runs the table in those. Florida State, who knows? I mean, that team's getting a little better, and it's a rivalry game, and crazy stuff happens in rivalry games. I don't think Missouri or South Carolina is good enough to beat them, nor is Samford. But here's the thing. They're going to be 4-4 again after this weekend, and I don't know that beating a lot of those teams other than Florida State is going to really make that fan base feel really good about things down there.
It's not going to do anything. You beat Samford, who cares? You beat Missouri, right. Who cares? Everybody's running all over Missouri. Florida State, okay, rivalry game, but Florida State, we've seen what they look like this year. Yeah, given they've played a little better in recent past, in recent couple of weeks, but you look at this thing, man, and I put out an article. A lot of people forgot. Even the recruiting standpoint, you got a lot of Florida fans that are upset with what's going on in recruiting, and I think they also forget, not the fans, but just overall in general, Dan Mullen's got a show cause right now. That guy cannot go on the road and recruit. He cannot go in a house. He can't go to a football game. He can only host recruits at home at Florida. So I think recruiting has kind of fallen off a little bit at Florida. And here's the thing too, Chris. Like, this football team, they have to start taking advantage of the opportunities that are around them. Because right now it feels like, even though Florida, played for an SEC title recently, it's never felt like Florida was actually in contention for a national championship since Dan Mullen's been there. And I think that's the problem that they're starting to run into is, are we getting the same Dan Mullen that they got at Mississippi State, but he's just doing it at Florida?
Well, you might argue the other thing dragging him down too is Todd Grantham.
Well, that's their fault, though. I mean,
Yeah.
they could have paid the money last year, and they could have found a replacement, but they wanted to wait till Todd Grantham's contract, it runs out to do something different on defense. So I blame Dan Mullen, and I blame Scott Strickland for that. They brought that on themselves. If they didn't look, we got a good feeling of what Todd Grantham was previously before all this, but we knew what was going down at Florida last year. The fact that you brought him back with a lineup that you could at least win 9 games with, I think if they had found the quarterback situation, and they had to replace a lot, but whatever, the defensive side of the football, to me, is not really all the problem. It's what's going on offense as well that's really just sidestepping the defense. Like, if you're having to keep up with so many points, or even look at that Kentucky game. I thought the Florida defense played pretty well against Kentucky. It was just giving up certain plays and not being able to hit downfield with Emory Jones and, the flip-flopping between Anthony Richardson and if he's going to play here, if he's going to play not. Like, Florida's future at quarterback is not Emory Jones, it's Anthony Richardson. And the sooner that Dan Mullen makes that public and makes folks realize, okay, we're looking towards the future, life is going to be a lot easier on him, at least for the time being. So I'm interested to see what happens on Saturday. But we know Dan Mullen. And it ain't going to surprise me one bit, Chris, if he trots out Emory Jones on Saturday just because he can.
Yeah, and I want to table the quarterback discussion for a minute because you said something that piqued my curiosity. You talked about waiting for his contract to expire. Trey, this is the SEC where they print money for football programs. And that's a really interesting statement that I don't understand, A. B, and you heard this in past things, right? Florida was like one of the last schools to get an indoor practice facility and some things like that. I mean, in fact, I think they've got one now. But, I mean, it's just weird because this is a league where football's king, where teams don't mind spending, and I don't get that at all. Explain that.
I think it's the Florida way. Like, they invested a lot of money into their baseball facility, got a brand new baseball stadium down there, trying to get things renovated when it comes to an indoor facility with the football program. And you look at the money that's being spent right now. I mean, look at the contract money that Dan Mullen's making at the moment. So I've always looked at Florida and I always thought, okay, they're holding on to their money a little bit too tight. Like, you can't tell me that the Bull Gator Club down there, or the whatever it is, the UAAF or whatever, I forgot the name of the organization, but you can't tell me that they don't have the money to make Todd Grantham go away and go get yourself a defensive coordinator, that's going to come in there and he's going to be there for 4 years. Because pretty much, here's what you're doing. Pretty much when you hire a new defensive coordinator, you're kind of resetting your clock in a way for Dan Mullen. You're saying, okay, we've hired this guy. We're going to let him do the defensive part of this thing. Okay, there's another 2 years to Dan Mullen's tenure at Florida. Because now you're going to say, okay, let's get our defense built up. Let's see what we can do. I'll handle offense, you handle defense type thing. So, I don't agree with the money part and how Florida handles things down there. Because, we got Tennessee up here where I'm at that pays Kevin Steele for 3.5 weeks worth of work and he makes $1 million. And Tennessee is cash strapped. Like, overall that statement might be kind of broad, but they've spent so much money. They don't have the reserve as other schools have. So you can't tell me Florida doesn't have the money to make a change at defensive coordinator and pay somebody out. And then also, like I said again, it gets you back in the good graces of the boosters and the fans that are down there in Florida. Because you know what? Florida was out of the SEC East contention by week 5 of this season. That cannot happen in Gainesville.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't get it either. The other thing that you hit on was the quarterback situation, and I thought it was funny the way that you worded it about he's going to start Emory Jones just because he can. Is it stubbornness? I mean, you know how coaches are. They see what a kid can run in the offense and what a kid can't do, and they see stuff where quarterbacks screw things up that we don't. But even with that, it just seems like Richardson is their better option. And I think the way that you put it, I don't know if it's accurate, but it was very interesting.
I was talking with somebody the other night down in Gainesville inside the program, and we got to talking about the quarterbacks. And we know Dan Mullen is stubborn. You know, he is twice in the last 6 days talked about how, look, you know, we're going to let both quarterbacks play it out in practice. We'll figure out a game plan. Like, there shouldn't be a game plan. Like, if you're looking towards the future and you think you have a chance to win on Saturday, you're not trotting Emory Jones out there. You're trotting Anthony Richardson, and you say, hey, kid, here's the fire. Run into it. Let's see what you got. And I can't make the comparison to, like, what went on in Knoxville with Garantano, because I don't feel like Tennessee had backups, but they weren't much better than
they weren't Richardson. Yeah.
Right. It didn't make sense. So you look at a situation like Florida where it's not just hype. It's not just what he did against USF or anything along those lines. Like, this kid has shown he has the ability to play the game of football and play it at a high level. You got to give him a chance, though. You can't have, you know, you saw what he did against LSU with his back against the wall in Baton Rouge. What does he do? He comes out, his first play, he throws an interception, but then he settles down, and then all of a sudden Florida scores and scores and scores against LSU, and then we've got a tight game in Baton Rouge. So don't tell me this kid is not good enough to be thrown into the fire and you try to get results. So Dan Mullen's got a decision to make, and I promise you, if he rides with Emory for most of that game on Saturday, and by the way, Kirby Smart's preparing for Anthony Richardson just as much as he's preparing for Emory Jones. So if they trot Emory out there and he plays for most of that game, you thought the heat was bad now down in Gainesville? Wait till after that game when they get beat by 21 points.
Okay, here's my alternate explanation, because you know recruiting matters and recruiting promises matter. My theory, because Dan Mullen handpicked him as his quarterback in what, like ninth grade? How much of it is that the whole, hey, I sold you that this was going to be your job, you waited your turn, and just not yanking the rug out from under him this early? Look, I think all coaches have to play this game to some degree. What do you think there?
I think it's the same thing that Jeremy Pruitt did with Jarrett Garantano.
Yeah.
For 2.5, 3 years, he said, Garantano, you're my guy. You're my guy. I'm not going away from you. You're going to be my guy. Well, then what happens? Garantano, God love the kid, okay, did not play up to potential. What happens is it cost you a bunch of games at Tennessee. Yeah, he came back and he beat Missouri or South Carolina and helped you win those type of games. But he also lost you some games at Tennessee that you could have won. I think that's a situation that you're looking at now. And I'm trying not to make that comparison between Emory and Jarrett, but it's the one that comes to my head right now. You know, if you remember back in the day, Dak Prescott, you know, was the guy on the sideline that they didn't know if he had it or not. But then all of a sudden they threw him in against LSU, his first game, you know, and he goes out there and he's the quarterback of the future. So I just kind of look at this situation. It's like, okay, you're playing in this high-profile game against the number one team in the country twice in one season, by the way. They're going to play the number one team in the country. So you look at it, what do you have to lose? You've got nothing to lose on Saturday. The only thing you have to lose is either a chance in the Outback Bowl or a chance at the Music City Bowl. That's it. So go ahead and make your change now and build towards the future and say, Emory, we appreciate what you've done here, but we feel we have to go in a different direction. This is a business now, and they have to understand that part of it.
Does Florida have a prayer in this game at all? Because I thought a few weeks ago they were sort of a dark horse candidate maybe to win that game, and then LSU came along. And look, LSU did it with ball control, right? And that's what Georgia's going to do too. So I'm not super encouraged given the events of the last few weeks now.
No, and not against the – see, here's the way I look at it. Georgia's already played the Florida offense in a way 3 different times. They beat Arkansas with a quarterback like KJ Jefferson. You beat Auburn with a quarterback like Bo Nix, who can get outside the pocket and make plays with his feet. Bo Nix can sling the ball down the field as well. He's got a big game this weekend. And then they played Will Levis in Kentucky, where Kentucky tries to run the football to set up the pass with Will Levis. And Will Levis is not the best passer in the world because they don't have a lot of explosive plays. So in my opinion, Georgia has already kind of played what Florida is going to do on Saturday 3 times, and they've killed those opponents. So I don't know if there's anything Florida can do that's going to catch them off guard because they've already seen this type of offense ran multiple times this year in different ways. They are so prepared for what Florida can bring. Like Florida can't rush Emory Jones up the middle or get him on an outside zone read or anything along those lines and act like Georgia's never seen it before. Georgia has seen that the last 4 weeks. They understand what they're going to have to do, which is collapse the pocket. Make Emory get outside, and then Georgia linebackers are probably going to have a spy on Richardson or Emory, whoever's playing, and Georgia is quick enough to make those plays. That's the thing that gets me. Like, it goes back to that Tennessee-Alabama game this past weekend. Hendon Hooker was kind of hurt, but there were plays where he can get outside the pocket and get down the field, but Alabama linebackers were quick enough to stop that. That's what I think Georgia has. Georgia has that secondary, can play that nickel spot, even the linebackers, to shut down whatever Florida's going to try to do when it comes to getting the quarterback on the run and making plays with his feet.
We got 3 more games this weekend. 2 of them I think are very interesting, and you could actually make a case the other one is too in its own way. And let's start with the one I think most people are watching this weekend. That's Auburn and Ole Miss. What do you make of that one, Trey?
It's got shootout written all over it in a weird way. I think Auburn is good enough to beat Ole Miss this weekend. I think Auburn's defense is better than Tennessee's, and I think their defense is better than better than Arkansas, definitely. Yeah. So when you look at what they're going to try to put out there this weekend, and they're going to try to go forth, Auburn against Matt Corral, which, by the way, Matt Corral, if he has another 130-yard rushing and 200-yard passing game, the kid deserves to be in New York City for the Heisman Trophy ceremony, if not even holding up that Heisman Trophy. So you look at what Auburn's going to have to do, and they're just going to have to play Corral. They're going to have to put a spy on him. And Corral's going to beat Auburn deep a couple times. But here's another thing. Ole Miss's defense is not that good. Like, they're just not that – like, everybody thought they had taken a step and they were pretty decent and whatnot. No, you let Alabama put up a bunch of points. You let Arkansas score over 50. You let Tennessee literally have one – all Tennessee needed was to score. They had 3 chances to win in the fourth quarter, and they couldn't convert on any of them. I don't trust Ole Miss's defense right now, which is where Bo Nix comes into play in that running game with Tank Bigsby. Because what they're going to do is they're going to run the ball to set up Bo Nix in the play action in the pass. But let's also not forget Bo Nix is a really good scrambler, and he can make plays on the run. So I look at this game this weekend, and, yeah, you can pretty much kind of call it a toss-up in the SEC West. But I think Auburn has enough to take down Ole Miss and kind of ruin the season that Kiffin's kind of putting together, in Oxford. But you're going to see a lot of craziness out of this game. You're going to see a lot of play calls. Maybe a couple trick plays thrown in there, and you're going to see Matt Corral run until Auburn can stop him. And when they do stop him, they're just going to try to beat him deep. So I'm excited to see what this game looks like on the Plains this weekend.
Well, Ole Miss's defense has gone from awful to maybe a little below average, which is a big improvement, and that helps. I mean, and when you've got Matt Corral in that offense, you can score enough points to win, which Ole Miss has been doing. Right. I've got some issues with Auburn. Bo Nix is always where the focus is there, Trey. But Tank Bigsby hasn't had a good game in, at least a month now? There's part of me that doesn't understand what's going on there.
I think they're relying on Bo Nix too much in the run game and him getting outside the pocket, making plays with his feet. I think a lot of times, too, I went back and watched a couple of their games, especially that Georgia game. You saw a lot of times where they were running, potentially an option or some kind of zone read or play, but you saw Bo Nix pull it. and him try to make the play outside the pocket compared to letting Bigsby find that lane up the middle. You can find good views and you can see those lanes that are opened up. But Bo Nix made some decisions at times that I didn't think were smart with him trying to make plays with his feet outside the pocket, and find receivers down the field. I agree with you about Tank. There was talk that he had a little injury and maybe something kind of holding him up. I more or less think it's been, defenses playing Bigsby and saying, okay, we're going to make Bo Nix beat us. And we've seen that happen a few times. We saw it happen down in Baton Rouge. I don't take much away from that Georgia game because Georgia's just too darn good on defense. But I do look at it, what they did at Arkansas, where they went up there and they had kind of a balanced attack in a way. I thought Bo Nix played good. I thought their special teams and their defense did as well. That's what's going to help them this weekend. They're going to need good field position, force Ole Miss, to punt. Don't let them come out there and be converting. And here's one more thing, too, that Auburn's going to be relying on. They're going to be relying on Lane Kiffin to be dumb and go for it on a lot of 4th down and 4s and stuff like that and try to get off the field in that manner besides punting. So, and Lane Kiffin he's a smart dude, but I go back to even that Alabama game. He put his defense in horrible position by giving Alabama the ball around their own, the Ole Miss 40-yard line, and it kills whatever your defense is trying to do. So, you're going to see that this weekend. There's going to be 4th and 3s at their own 45-yard line that they're going to go for because they know that I don't think their defense can hold up for a full 4 quarters.
Okay, what happens if Ole Miss wins this game on the Auburn end? Because Bryan Harsin, and you know how much this matters at Auburn, Trey.
Yep.
If you're in that family, that gets you a lot of points with a lot of the boosters there. And if you're not, then some people don't accept that. They've already lost a couple games. This could be a third. I'm not saying that Auburn is going to pull the plug on Bryan Harsin this year after one season, but I do wonder what that does to morale down there. And at Auburn, and this is not just Auburn, right? You see it at Tennessee. You see it at LSU. Once it starts going poorly there, it's much easier for the wheels to come off because the fans just go crazy. And so I'm just wondering if they lose this game, and especially if it's maybe 10 points or more, where does that go for Bryan Harsin?
I think he's got leverage still. There's one thing you got to realize about football in the South. If you aren't in with folks, if you haven't had relationship with folks in the past, if they don't know you, that goes a long way with how you're going to be received over the next couple of years within a program. Now, does Bryan Harsin make the move to be like, okay, look, I made a couple coaching hires when I first got here on my assistants that maybe didn't work out in this first year, and maybe I can already see it down the road not working out. Does he make 1 or 2 changes? I think that's the interesting thing to look at. The also other interesting thing to look at is what kind of pressure does he get from boosters? Allen Green's not going to throw pressure on Bryan Harsin, but what kind of, here's the thing. When you get down to the South and you get down to Auburn especially, you got to get to know the big boosters down there, and you got to get to know how things run. And you also got to realize boosters control everything at Auburn, okay? They're paying for your travel. They're paying for your recruits. They're paying for certain. You have got to realize that if you don't have that relationship and you can't build that thing up, you set yourself up in a bad spot when you're trying to make advances towards the future. So I look at Auburn where he ain't going anywhere this year. He ain't going anywhere maybe next year, but it wouldn't surprise me if we have another Joe Moorhead on our hands.
Oh, I wish to God I had the split screen working right now because it would be fantastic. But are you suggesting he's not kissed the ring?
I don't know if he's kissed the ring yet, the Yellowwood ring down there. I don't know if he's kissed that yet. I'm sure he's made a couple stops at the old casino down there about 30 minutes away, but I don't know if he's kissed the ring yet.
All right.
Think about how the culture shock that was for Bryan Harsin.
Oh.
I know, and like in the Southwest area, but it's a whole different animal in Auburn, man. That's why you got to love it. You got to love SEC football.
Mississippi State, Kentucky has been a game that has intrigued me for weeks. Very different styles. State has been really – the games are mostly close except for a couple, including the one in Nashville last week, which that's another animal. But I just think the contrast of styles is really interesting. I think that State's lost – I think Kentucky's lost. I think it's last 5 in Starkville. To me, it's just a fascinating matchup because they're vastly different teams.
Mark Stoops is 0-4 in Starkville. I've not won down there since 2008. I agree with you on the different types of teams. Will Rogers threw the ball 57 times last week against Vanderbilt. They didn't run the ball a lot at all, and that's not their MO.
They never do. Yeah.
No, and not even trying to set up the passing game. They're like, no, we don't care. We're just
their passing game is their running game.
Right, we're just going to throw the football, and you're going to have to keep up with us. I think that Kentucky. Here's what scares me about Kentucky. I don't think their offense is as good enough as what people wanted to make them out to be in their ranking right now. If Chris Rodriguez doesn't get going, Kentucky's offense is relying on Will Levis to get the ball to Wan'Dale Robinson 5 yards off the line of scrimmage and him make plays. Kentucky is not explosive on offense. And when I say explosive, I mean throwing the ball 30-plus yards down the field. If you go
wait a minute. I would push back on that a minute. We have seen that. Now, it may have been a while. It may have been against ULM and teams, but they've got Wan'Dale Robinson, Josh Ali have done that before. Now, Ali may be hurt. And to me, the bigger problem you alluded to was Rodriguez because I think he was 7 for 7 last time out. But anyway, carry on. Sorry.
Oh, no, I just know you don't see this on a consistent basis when they're trying to throw the ball deep down the field. And it works for what they're doing. They're getting Robinson, they're getting Ali, get them into that 10-yard gap right there in the middle of the field and let them make plays. So that's the one thing that I look at with Kentucky's offense. If you don't get Rodriguez going and you don't get Kavosier Smoke going out of that backfield, you're going to run into major problems because Will Levis reminds me of like a bigger Bo Nix in a sense, where he tries to get outside the pocket, make plays with his feet, tries to get the ball down the field on the run, and when the pocket collapses, yes, he can make plays. But I don't know how much I trust him right now. And that's okay. But I feel like Mississippi State, Kentucky, I think has, if I'm not mistaken, they have 12 sacks on the year. I don't have the stats brought up to me right now. But Will Rogers is the type of quarterback that can get the ball out real quick and can get the ball down the field, and they can spread them out. And they get off the field as well pretty quickly, so their defense is ready to go. I mean, it's not like, let's say at Tennessee where Tennessee runs a minute 50 off the clock and stuff like that, and then their defense is back on the field. I feel like Mississippi State's defense is actually pretty decent enough to force the other teams off the field in just the amount of time. I don't look at the Bama game. It was 49-9. It was going to be tough against Alabama to begin with. Go back and look at that Texas A&M game where Mississippi State beat Texas A&M. And the way that they played Calzada and also the way that they played Spiller in the run game. I think this sets up for an upset this weekend. Now, if you were Kentucky and you're rolling into this game, 6-1 on the season, 7-1 on the season, and you're trying to continue this momentum, you got to hit Mike Leach right in the mouth on this defensive part of it, which means you've got to bring the pressure. You're going to have to stack the box. You got to bring Pascal off the edge. He's going to have to be in there. And you've got to force Will Rogers to make a bunch of mistakes. That's going to be key to me. Rogers does have every now and then he's going to throw an interception. Last week you saw it against Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt picked him off, I think, twice last weekend. So if they can stay out of that, and if they can keep the pressure that Kentucky's going to bring along the defensive line at the linebacker spot off Rogers, then I think Mississippi State's got a really, really good opportunity this weekend. And if Kentucky cannot get anything going with Rodriguez, it's going to be a long day in Starkville if Rodriguez only gets 40 yards on the ground, and nothing out of the backfield. So they need to get more out of Smoke Rodriguez. Ali will be back this weekend for Kentucky. That should help. We just got to see what they can do.
Yeah, and there were a couple things, and I know State just beat the brakes off Vanderbilt last week, but there were some things that I saw in that game that were problematic, and State has had issues in pass protection as much as Rogers. Thank you, Will Rogers. As quickly as Will Rogers gets rid of the ball at times, there are other times he does it. Vanderbilt, which does not get pressure on anybody, got pressure on him last week. He threw 2 picks, and it probably should have been 3. There was one that was overturned. And so I see some things with State I'm concerned about in that regard. I don't know if they will line up Pascal on Charlie Cross, who I think their left tackle has done a pretty good job. So I'll be interested to see what Stoops does and where he lines up his pass rushers, because you can get pressure against this team at certain parts of the line that have just been really vulnerable for State all year.
Well, this is like, you have to look at it in this point of view too. This is such a big game for Mississippi State to have a top 12 team come in there, have Mike Leach an opportunity to beat a team. Look, they beat A&M, but A&M had not beaten Alabama yet, and we thought A&M was kind of just dead in the water, pretty much. You beat a Kentucky team that's ranked like this, and I think it sets yourself up for, high praise the rest of the year. They got a couple tough games left, but sets up momentum on their side. And we know what Kentucky's MO is going to be this weekend. Maybe they surprise some folks. Maybe they come out and try to run the football a little bit, catch Kentucky off guard, and then it sets up that play action with Will Rogers, and now Kentucky's really confused. I could see Mike Leach doing something like that just because how crazy he is as an offensive play caller. Run the football now, catch the Wildcats off guard on a 10-yard gain, something like that, and then Will Rogers is now set up for the PA. So, I look for a couple wild things to happen in Starkville this weekend, and I already predicted it yesterday. I think Mississippi State beats Kentucky on Saturday.
Last game on the schedule this week, Vanderbilt and Missouri, which, if for no other reason, it's interesting because somebody's going to get that first Power 5 win all year, which I think there's 5 teams. Indiana's in there. Kansas and Arizona is at the other 2. So somebody's going to walk away unless, they'll probably have a forfeit now just because. Right. Look, I don't know. I don't know that there's a lot of confidence on either sideline right now, but Missouri's got to gear to its offense, and Vanderbilt just frankly doesn't have an offense right now.
Yeah, but how's Missouri an 18-point favorite over Vanderbilt? Come on. What has Missouri done this year?
In Nashville.
Right.
Trey, that tells you that's all about Vanderbilt, right? That's how bad it has gotten.
I get it, but it's also bad in Columbia. You're not getting anything out of Basilak. Tyler Beatty, you're not getting anything out of. Eli Drink, which I know recruiting-wise they're doing pretty decent, but let's not act like Missouri is 5 steps above Vanderbilt right now. Missouri's not playing good football. Missouri's playing South Carolina football right now. And would it surprise me to see Vanderbilt get their first win against Missouri? No, not at all. Because it feels like this team takes on the mentality of Clark Lee in a way. And that is here's what I thought. I thought Clark Lee and Vanderbilt would come out and play a hell of a lot better than they played last weekend because of how they played at South Carolina and how close they kept it. Turns out that wasn't the case. Mississippi State comes out in the first half. They've bombarded them. Game's over with by halftime. But I still look at this Vanderbilt football team, and I still feel like something is at least there when it comes to getting a win against an opponent you're not supposed to beat. And Missouri lines that up perfectly. Here's how they do it. If Vanderbilt can play Missouri this weekend like they played Mississippi State in the passing game, where they should have had 3 interceptions against Mississippi State. And if they convert that into good field position and are able to somehow run the football, like I'm now convinced anybody can run the football on Missouri's defensive line. I'm convinced my alma mater in high school could run the football against Missouri's defensive line.
You and I could lock arms and skip through the Missouri defense right now.
We could at least gain 1.5 yards. So what I'm getting at is that if Vanderbilt's going to take advantage of it, you take advantage of it, a little bit of the run game, a little bit of play action, get outside Wright, who I'd imagine is going to be the quarterback this weekend for Vanderbilt. You use his legs to your advantage because we've seen so many teams do that against Missouri. I don't trust Missouri. I don't trust 18 points in Nashville. And it wouldn't surprise me if fans are really aggravated with Eli Drinkwitz after this weekend because the national narrative is now, man, look how bad Vanderbilt's playing. You don't want to lose to them. That's going to make SportsCenter. That's where we're at right now. But I think Vanderbilt can play with Missouri if they can literally do the same thing they did last weekend against Will Rogers. Will Rogers threw it 57 times, okay? You're not going to see Bazelak throw it 57 times because they have Tyler Beatty. So they're going to try to run the football as well. But if they can get a couple turnovers, get themselves in a nice field position, I at least think it gives Vanderbilt a chance against the Tigers.
Well, no back in the country just rips apart bad defenses like Tyler Beatty either.
I don't disagree. I really don't disagree, but you got to be able to prove it to me in the passing game as much as you're doing on the run game. Like like a lot of teams have gone into Columbia and just run the football and won the game that way. Tennessee did that pretty much. A&M did that. But to me, it feels like on that opposite end of it, okay, you can try Beatty all you want in that run game, but if you can't get anything out of Connor, like they're already talking about on webs, and folks that cover Missouri, they're already talking about potentially switching quarterbacks or playing 2 quarterbacks during the game. So we went from beginning of the season, Connor Bazelak, look at him, going to be a showstopper this year in the SEC, and this is not a knock towards Connor at all. It's a knock towards expectations. Now we're getting here, and we're week 7 into the season. Connor's not playing too well. The situation in Missouri's not going good. So I just feel like with everything going on, it just wouldn't surprise me if Missouri dropped a game they weren't supposed to.
I think in hindsight, expectations were set too high for Missouri. I remember thinking in preseason, Missouri, Kentucky, probably that number 3 team in the league. And boy, that one got settled in a hurry. I mean, that was a close game, but those teams have gone in totally opposite directions since they played. But you go back and look, and Missouri last year, Trey, played a lot of games. I mean, they won some games, but the ones they lost were blowouts, and that should have told us we probably should have put more stock into that than we did.
Yeah, we did. And then when we thought the defense would be somewhat decent, and you look at that defensive line and that linebacking core right now, that's about the worst that you're going to see in the Southeastern Conference. Actually, you know what? It is the worst that you'll see in the Southeastern Conference if you go look at the stats that other teams have been able to put up in the rushing game against them. So Missouri got a long way to go, man. Like, they could be fine on offense, but it's not like your Ole Miss where you've got playmakers on both sides of the ball all over the field, at those certain spots that can benefit you. I think Missouri, a little bit of trouble going on in Columbia.
Trey, anything else before we end the podcast today?
No, I got a couple articles coming out in the next couple of days writing about, why Tennessee needs to be cheering on Kentucky this weekend. I think Tennessee has a really good opportunity to go to Lexington and win next week after everybody gets healthy. They're going to have Tyon Evans back, should have Cade Mays back, fully healthy. Hendon Hooker should be fully healthy by then. So if you're a Tennessee fan, you root for Kentucky to win because then you could potentially go to Lexington. And we see how college football is. There's going to be a top 10 team that's going to lose this weekend. And then that's going to put Kentucky, if they win, in the top 10. And Josh Heupel has an opportunity to go get a signature win on the road in Lexington against a team that I don't think is top 10 worthy, but they're going to have that number beside their name.
Hey, Trey, thanks for joining us today. I have a feeling you and I are going to be doing a lot more of these pretty soon.
You got that right, buddy. It's always a privilege, and I'm glad I got to hang out. The Google headquarters today with you. Hope you have a great week.
Are you going to put up all the furniture behind you when you're done? If we figure out, is this a daycare? People that are listening audio only are going to be very confused, but Trey's got a very interesting background behind him.
You don't need to worry about what goes on here, okay? I got a side hustle going on here. Don't worry about it. The kids have their juice boxes. They're fine. Everything's good.
As long as the kids and you have your juice boxes, then we're all good.
I got my 24-pack of juice boxes. We're good. Capri Suns, about that.
You can't do a show without them. That's an old joke back to the day Trey and I did radio together. Seriously, Trey, thanks for joining us. Let's do this again soon.
Can't wait, brother. Have a great week.
All right, he's Trey Wallace at Outkick. I'm Chris Lee of the 14. Thanks for listening and watching today's show.